Hey there, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the invisible rules of nature, this amazing system of energy that connects every single living thing, from a tiny blade of grass all the way up to the fiercest predator. So let me ask you a question. What could a hawk soaring through the sky, a rabbit hiding in a bush, and a single blade of grass possibly have in common? You might think it's a complicated riddle, but it really boils down to just one thing: energy. They're all part of this hidden, interconnected system that basically decides who eats who. To really wrap our heads around this system, we've got to follow the energy. And that journey, well, it doesn't start in a forest or in the ocean. It starts 93 million miles away, with our sun. That's right, the sun. It is the ultimate power plant for almost all life on our planet. It's just beaming down all this light energy that gets captured right here on Earth. So, how does that happen? Well, it's through this incredible process called photosynthesis. You can think of plants as these amazing little solar-powered chefs. They take that light energy from the sun and they turn it into chemical energy, basically food. And that makes them the absolute foundation of this whole energy journey. Okay, so we know where the energy comes from. Now let's trace its path in the simplest way we can imagine, just a straight line. And this is what biologists call a food chain. It's basically a super simple map that shows how energy gets passed from one living thing to the next. At the very bottom, the start of every single food chain, you've got a producer. These are the organisms, almost always plants, that make their own food using the sun's energy. They're the creators, the ones that get all the energy into the system in the first place. And then you have the consumers. And just like the name says, they get their energy by consuming other organisms. They're the ones taking that energy and moving it on up the line. Let's make this real with a classic example. So sunlight fuels the plant. That's our producer. Then that plant gets eaten by a mouse. That's our primary consumer. And finally, the mouse gets eaten by the owl, our secondary consumer. Now, this is super important. Those arrows, they show you the direction the energy is flowing, from the thing being eaten to the thing that's doing the eating. So, a simple, neat line, it's a great way to get the basics down. But, as you probably already know, nature is almost never that simple or neat. In reality, it's way, way messier. I mean, come on, animals in the real world rarely eat just one single thing, right? That little mouse on the owl's menu, it's probably also being hunted by foxes and weasels. And this reality creates a model that's way more complex and tangled. So, welcome to the food web. A food web is really just what happens when you take a whole bunch of those simple food chains and you tangle them all together. It's a network that shows how life is actually connected in all these different, overlapping ways. What's so cool about a picture like this is how it shows you that interdependence. So take a look at the fox. It eats rabbits, which eat plants, right? So in that chain, the fox is a secondary consumer. But it also eats blackbirds, which eat slugs, which eat plants. In that chain, the fox is a tertiary consumer. It's one animal playing multiple roles. This web shows you that if you took away the rabbits, yeah, the foxes would feel it, but they could still eat mice and blackbirds. It's like this complicated but crucial safety net. This brings up a really interesting question, though. If energy is just getting transferred from one level to the next, why don't we see food chains that are like 20 or 30 animals long? Why do they always seem to stop? To figure that out, let's look at these pyramids. Now, a pyramid of numbers on the left can sometimes fool you. For example, one huge oak tree can support thousands and thousands of insects. The pyramid would look upside down. But a pyramid of biomass, which measures the total weight of all the living things at each level, that tells the real story. It is always pyramid-shaped, with a giant base and a tiny little top. And that tells us something fundamental is getting lost at each step. And this visual just spells it out perfectly. The thing that's getting lost is energy. And here's the kicker. On average, only about 10% of the energy from one level gets stored in the next. That means 90% of it is just gone. That's a huge, huge drop-off. Let's really put that into perspective. Okay, say we start with 1 million joules of energy from the sun shining down. Of that million joules, our producers, the plants, they only manage to capture and store about 10,000 of those joules. That's a 99% loss right out of the gate. And then the primary consumers who eat those plants, they only get about 1,000 joules from that. By the time we get to these secondary consumers, we're down to just 100 joules from that original million. It's incredible. So where the heck did all that energy go? Well, it's not just disappearing. A huge amount is lost as body heat. Energy is burned just moving around, breathing, just staying alive. A lot of energy is also locked away in parts that don't get eaten, like bones or fur or roots. And finally, some of it just gets passed out as waste. The whole transfer process is just unbelievably inefficient. Okay, so let's tie these two big ideas together. We have this complex web where everything is interdependent, but it's all being fueled by a system that loses 90% of its energy at every single step. So what does that actually mean for the real world? Well, it's the answer to our big question. This massive, constant energy loss is precisely why food chains almost never have more than 4 or 5 levels. By the time you get up to a 5th level, there's just not enough energy left from that original sunlight to support a whole other population of predators. The tank is basically empty. And this whole concept has a really direct impact on us, on humans. This quote from our source material just hits the nail on the head. When you eat vegetables, you're getting your energy pretty efficiently, right from the 2nd level. But to eat meat, you're eating at the 3rd or even 4th level. That animal had to eat a ton of plant material, losing energy all along the way, just to provide you with a much smaller amount of energy. So, the next time you sit down for a meal, just take a second and look at your plate. Think about the sun, the plants, the animals. Can you trace that incredible and, frankly, inefficient journey that energy took all the way from a star 93 million miles away, right onto your fork?